As Jesus enters Jerusalem this morning, the city is abuzz, bustling as people are preparing for the holy festival of Passover, preparing to offer sacrifice and give their temple tax. Pilgrims purchase animals and exchange Roman coins for coins appropriate for use in the temple, coins made of a finer quality of silver and without graven images. Vendors fill the city. The closer one comes to the temple, the more the vendors and the greater the price, the louder the shouting for attention. The vendors along the outside wall of the temple are well versed in bargaining, making the people feel they have gotten a really good deal at a great price. The vendors are all vying for business because in Jerusalem, the business is the temple and taking care of people's spiritual needs, providing for their sacrifices and their donations make up the base of the economy. But today, as Jesus enters the temple, the animals are inside, in the court of the Gentiles. This is a new occurrence, and he is instantly consumed with zeal. He takes a moment, finds some cord, braids it into a whip, and then with purpose directs that anger out, cleansing the temple. He drives out the sheep and the cattle, pours out the coins, and overturns the tables. And then he turns to the sellers of the doves and says, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." In the Gospel of John, it is at the beginning of Jesus' ministry that his zeal is kindled and his anger arises at the injustice of exploitation of the poor and infringement on the sanctuary of the marginalized. The Sadducees have moved the market from outside the temple walls into the court of the Gentiles, the place where Gentiles, those who were drawn to God but who had not been circumcised or had not fully committed to the faith, could come to worship. It was as close as they could come to entering into the temple itself. It was their sanctuaries within the temple gates. And it was on the outside edge of the sanctuary, farthest away from the Holy of Holies. So here it would be like at the very back of the church, or maybe in the narthex, and this would be our Holy of Holies. And the doves or pigeons were a poor person's offering for sacrifice. And if you remember, that is what Mary and Joseph offered when Jesus was presented at the temple, a pigeon. The prices on the animals for sale within the temple gate increased greatly, creating an even greater burden on the poor. Jesus' zeal in the moment calls to the disciples' mind the prophecy, "Zeal for your house will consume me." When questioned by the temple authorities, Jesus responds with a prophecy of his own. "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." Speaking about the temple of his own body, and he is speaking from above. And the authorities are hearing the words from a place below. Often in our earthbound understanding, we miss the mark because we are not able to grasp the boundlessness of God. Understanding often comes in hindsight. It was only after the resurrection that understanding began to break in. In the early encounters with the resurrected Christ, the disciples began to have aha moments, like when he appeared to them in the upper room behind locked doors, or when he joined the disciples on the road to Emmaus, walking in their sadness. And then he sat down and broke and blessed the bread, and then he just disappeared. And they said, Were our hearts not on fire when he was speaking? Now they begin to understand. As much as anyone is able to understand on this side of the veil. It is interesting that when things are out of place or out of order in our lives or other people's lives, perhaps a specific situation or even out in the greater world, people often begin to feel a bit untethered, disoriented, and the response to what is happening varies. People may be walking around confused, become or feel unsettled, anxious, and do things to alleviate their distress. Or they seek peace through meditation and prayer, or turn to nature to stand in awe of God at work in creation. Or people come to recognize the injustice of the chaos, disorder, or actions towards others. And compassion and anger are kindled, resulting in action to address the injustice. Jesus sets about setting things in order for everyone, especially the marginalized and underprivileged. He speaks about the destruction of the temple, which is the temple of his body. It is the place where God and humanity, heaven and earth meet. It is the temple where all of humanity is welcomed, embraced, and loved. The poor, the marginalized, the disenfranchised, and those in prison, as well as the rich, the established, and the free. In Jesus, God calls everyone home with arms open wide to embrace each one, just as the father of the prodigal son embraced him when he came home. As the 10 Commandments call us beyond ourselves into relationship that honor God, self, and neighbor, they give us structure to love. In this season of Lent, I invite you to take time to examine the state of your soul. Is it anxious or filled with awe? Or is it filled with zeal? Or something, a bit of mix of all of it? There is a richness in the depth of the soul being nurtured in the seeming barrenness of the season. As we pray, study, reflect, and meditate, take note of what seeds are being planted within your soul, taking root, and preparing to emerge into the light to enrich the world today. Remember, Jesus' zeal was not hatred. His zeal came from a love and wanting just relationship for all people. You each are a beloved child of God, chosen. If you were born, you are chosen. Everyone who is born is chosen, is a beloved child of God. Yes, even the most egregious among us is beloved by God. And that can be a challenge to wrap our heads around. Often we want to blame and demoralize people for the wrongs in the world. Yet, if we really reflect on it and take a good look, we are all responsible to the things that we do that we don't even realize, the choices we make, the things we purchase, the relationships we have, how we greet a person or ignore that person or situation in the world. I invite you to embrace this moment and every moment to be a holy presence, a champion for both friend and foe, for the disadvantaged and disenfranchised children of God, and those who are well endowed, blessed we would say, because everything comes down to beginning and ending in love, as stated in the 10 Commandments. This frame God gave us to love God, to love self, to love neighbor. Love is our strength. And as Bishop Curry says, if it's not about love, it's not about God. So be it.